Have you ever thought about how a single innocent decision, one seemingly harmless action, could lead to tragedy? Picture a couple setting out for a kayaking adventure on one of the most dangerous days of the year. It was meant to be another thrilling outing, but it ended in a shocking way they never expected. Where do we draw the line between mistake and misfortune? How can one small word or choice change the course of everything? When everything falls apart in a split second, every action can turn against you. A single word spoken in shock can become a weapon in the hands of justice. Angelica's story shows how an unexpected chain of events can forever change a life. The Hudson Valley is a beautiful yet treacherous spot for outdoor adventure. Its stunning scenery and swift currents attract thrill seekers, and kayaking is a favorite sport for visitors. But the river's allure can be deceptive. Even experienced kayakers aren't always spared from its dangers. Angelica Graswald and Vincent Viafor loved the water. For them, it symbolized freedom and togetherness. On April 19, 2015, they set out on the Hudson River again, excited for the day ahead. Both had years of experience and enjoyed taking on challenges. But on that particular day, the Hudson showed no mercy. Strong winds stirred up powerful waves, and although their instincts urged them to turn back, they pushed forward. Their destination was an island with a mysterious castle inspired by Scottish traditions, a place they returned to time and again, drawn by its ancient allure. They spent the day enjoying nature, but as evening approached, their luck ran out. Rising waves and icy waters warned them of danger, yet they had no choice but to head back, as they weren't equipped to stay overnight. When Vincent's kayak began to fill with water, things took a tragic turn. Without a life jacket and trapped in the frigid waters, Vincent faced a dire situation. Shocked, Angelica called emergency services, explaining in desperation that she couldn't reach him due to the relentless waves pulling him further away. The dispatcher struggled to pinpoint their location, adding to the urgency as precious seconds slipped by. Vincent was already disappearing beneath the surface when rescuers arrived, but by then it was too late. From the shore, nothing could be seen of Vincent, and the darkening sky only deepened the tragedy. Angelica, at 35, was a woman with ambition, pursuing photography as a future career. Originally from Latvia, where her name was Angelica Lips, she dreamed of a new life in the United States. Despite 2 marriages and 2 divorces, she remained focused on her goal to settle in the U.S., obtain a work visa, and build a career. She eventually got her chance, securing a job as a nanny and moving to America. But meeting Vincent marked a turning point. At 46, Vincent had also been through 2 divorces and was successful in the construction business. Despite the age difference, their relationship developed quickly. Vincent was known for his generosity, often hosting gatherings and bringing friends together to enjoy a lively, active lifestyle. It was at one of these events that he first met Angelica. Just a few weeks later, she moved into his home in the small town of Poughkeepsie, New York, and their relationship quickly grew serious, with conversations about marriage and children becoming frequent. However, tensions simmered beneath the surface, intensifying just a day before the tragic accident. On April 18, 2015, Vincent and Angelica attended another party. Vincent enjoyed himself with friends, but Angelica left early, saying she didn't feel well. She appeared distant, interacting minimally, and Vincent's friends sensed some tension between them, noting a minor disagreement. Despite this, they parted ways that night, only to reunite the next morning. That's when Vincent suggested they go kayaking, hoping the outing on the Hudson River would bring them closer. Despite the chilly weather and rising wind, Angelica agreed to the trip. Their destination was Bannerman's Castle on an island in the middle of the river, where they planned a photo session. Angelica packed elegant outfits, hoping to capture some memorable shots. By noon, they were at the water's edge, ready for their adventure. But the strengthening wind signaled potential danger. Massive waves rose around them, and the cold made movement difficult. Angelica noticed the worsening conditions, yet Vincent's love for adrenaline and determination urged them to press on. Before they set off, Vincent made a statement that would later haunt Angelica: "This will be the adventure of your life." The journey to the castle went smoothly. Angelica later told the police they had shared a couple of beers before setting off, just to set the mood. They both knew they'd need to stay alert for the return trip. However, everything changed on the way back. The waves grew taller, and Vincent started to lag behind, shouting that his kayak was filling with water. Angelica turned and saw his vessel sinking. She tried to paddle back to him, but the strong current carried her toward the shore. Once she reached land, she called emergency services, but by then, Vincent had disappeared into the icy waters of the Hudson River. The evening of April 19, 2015, marked the start of an intense search that continued through the night. Divers combed the Hudson's murky waters, while a sonar-equipped boat navigated through fog and choppy waves, and helicopters scanned the area, all without success. Vincent's family was devastated, clinging to a faint hope that he might have somehow survived the freezing waters and strong currents, though they knew the odds were slim. Strangely, amidst the grief, Angelica appeared the calmest. She updated her social media, posting photos and videos as if nothing had happened, which deeply unsettled Vincent's family, who found her actions inappropriate and even suspicious. Angelica insisted she was holding on to hope, waiting for her fiancé's return, but her words rang hollow to Vincent's grieving relatives. 10 days after Vincent's disappearance, Angelica was back at the police station for further questioning. A comment she had made earlier caught the detective's attention. She mentioned she might have accidentally removed the drain plug from Vincent's kayak on the return trip. This small detail shifted the investigation's focus. Suddenly, Vincent's death seemed less like an accident. Angelica also told detectives that Vincent's paddle was damaged, missing a locking ring that made rowing difficult. These details, combined with a broken paddle and a missing plug, raised suspicions of foul play. Investigators started to wonder if Angelica might have set up the conditions that led to Vincent's drowning. But what could have motivated her? The motive was still unclear, so investigators began reaching out to those who knew the couple, hoping to find answers. The police made contact with Angelica's ex-boyfriend, Michael Coven, who had lived with her several years earlier. Michael was deeply shocked and unsettled when he was informed about the suspicions surrounding Angelica. While he expressed disbelief that she could be capable of such an act, he admitted that, looking back, he couldn't completely rule out the possibility. He revealed a side of Angelica that most people didn't see, a darker, more volatile personality that often emerged in certain situations. According to Michael, while Angelica appeared calm and composed most of the time, there were moments, particularly when alcohol was involved, when her demeanor would shift dramatically. She could become confrontational and prone to starting arguments. Michael explained that he often tolerated these outbursts with remarkable patience and quiet endurance, a trait that he believed spoke to Vincent's calm nature. However, Michael's recollection revealed something more significant. Just weeks before the tragic incident, Vincent had confided in a close friend, expressing serious doubts about their relationship. He revealed that he was questioning whether or not he should marry Angelica. He described her behavior as manipulative and aggressive, especially when she was pushed to a breaking point. During her questioning by investigators, Angelica acknowledged that there had been conflicts in their relationship, but she downplayed them, suggesting that the issues were private matters and not indicative of anything sinister. However, her evasive and ambiguous statements during the interrogation made detectives increasingly suspicious. Each contradictory remark seemed to add more fuel to the theory that Vincent's death might not have been an accident, but rather the result of deliberate actions that had been carefully planned. As the investigation progressed, the detectives discovered a financial motive that Angelica had never disclosed. Beyond the emotional and personal conflicts, there was a significant monetary incentive behind the tragedy. Angelica was the primary beneficiary of Vincent's life insurance policy, which was valued at approximately $500,000, a sum that could potentially change her entire financial future. At the time of Vincent's death, Angelica had been unemployed, and this unexpected windfall could resolve many of her financial struggles. It soon became clear that the motive went far beyond relationship issues or anger. It was about the money. This revelation marked a pivotal moment in the case, transforming Angelica from a grieving fiancé to the prime suspect in what was now being treated as a carefully orchestrated crime. Despite the mounting evidence and growing suspicions, Angelica maintained her innocence. However, the prosecution pressed forward, charging her with second-degree criminal wrongdoing. The bail was set at an eye-watering $9 million, a sum she could hardly afford. Given her foreign nationality, the prosecution also feared that she might attempt to flee the country, further complicating the case. As a result, Angelica remained in custody, awaiting trial, and the pressure continued to mount. Angelica's defense team immediately sought to challenge the case. They argued that the statements she had made during the prolonged 11-hour interrogation were legally inadmissible, as they had been obtained under duress. The defense attorney pointed out that, at the time of her questioning, Vincent's body had still not been recovered, and without forensic evidence, it was impossible to draw any definitive conclusions about foul play or deliberate wrongdoing. They maintained that Vincent's death was an unfortunate accident. The defense suggested that the kayak had capsized due to a sudden wave and that the drain plug might have become loose as the vessel began to sink, but they also pointed out that there was no clear evidence linking Angelica to the incident. The defense team organized a series of experiments on the Hudson River, involving a person with a similar build to Vincent sitting in an identical kayak. The tests revealed that even on a calm day, the kayak sat extremely low in the water, with only a few inches of clearance between the vessel and the surface. This indicated that large waves, like the ones likely encountered that fateful day, could easily have filled the kayak with water, even if the drain plug had remained in place. Additionally, the attorney pointed out that Vincent had been drinking, which could have impaired his ability to react properly to the conditions around him. The defense suggested that this combination of factors, bad weather, alcohol, and the physical nature of the kayak, created the perfect storm that led to the tragedy. As the investigation continued, the drain plug became a focal point of debate. It was a small component, barely larger than a fingertip, and some questioned how such a trivial detail could have caused such a catastrophic outcome. The drain plug was located at the top of the kayak, making it unlikely that it could have allowed enough water to enter to cause the boat to capsize. To further investigate, the defense called for additional experiments. These involved simulating the exact conditions of that day using a mannequin with the same build as Vincent, placed in a similar kayak and subjected to similar weather conditions. The test showed that even with the drain plug removed, the kayak did not take on water quickly enough to cause it to sink. In fact, the kayak only allowed a small amount of water to trickle in, which would not have been enough to cause Vincent's death. Despite these findings, the prosecution shifted its focus to the missing locking ring on the paddle, suggesting that the absence of this component could have hindered Vincent's ability to control the kayak. However, the defense countered by demonstrating that the paddle was still functional and operational, even without the locking ring. The absence of the ring did not, in their view, contribute to the fatal incident. The turning point came when Angelica, during her lengthy interrogation, admitted to touching both the drain plug and the paddle, a statement that would later become pivotal in the prosecution's case. These seemingly innocent actions were seized upon by investigators, who interpreted them as evidence of Angelica's involvement in a meticulously planned crime. To them, even the smallest detail, such as touching the paddle or the plug, could be construed as a deliberate act aimed at causing Vincent's death. The defense, however, argued that Angelica's statements had been obtained under intense emotional duress. A false confessions expert later reviewed the interrogation footage and confirmed that Angelica had been subjected to significant psychological pressure. The expert argued that the detectives had employed classic interrogation tactics, such as leading questions and the good cop, bad cop routine, that ultimately led Angelica to make contradictory statements. Angelica's responses, which grew increasingly vague and emotionally unstable, were seen as typical signs of emotional exhaustion, not an intentional confession of guilt. One particular remark, in which Angelica mentioned feeling free from the relationship, was interpreted by the detectives as an admission of intent to harm Vincent. In reality, the defense claimed this comment had nothing to do with the events on that day. It was simply a reflection of their long-standing relationship issues. Despite the defense's attempts to discredit the prosecution's theory, the case against Angelica continued to build. The detectives, satisfied with their interpretation of her statements, ignored any further clarifications she attempted to make. As the trial moved forward, it became clear that the smallest details of Angelica's words and actions would be scrutinized and used to shape the narrative of guilt. But was she truly responsible for Vincent's death? Or was the entire case a tragic misunderstanding fueled by emotional pressure, conflicting evidence, and the flaws of an imperfect justice system? During the investigation, an expert on false confessions testified that Angelica's responses during the interrogation were largely a result of her desire to escape the relentless questioning. Feeling cornered and exhausted, she gave several vague answers, which were then used to support the case against her. Meanwhile, Vincent's family and friends endured a growing sense of anguish and uncertainty as his body remained missing. This painful waiting continued until May 23, 2015, nearly a month after Vincent's disappearance, when a boater discovered his body in the Hudson River. It was found near Bannerman's Island, the same location where the couple had been on the day of the tragedy. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death as drowning, with no signs of struggle or foul play. While there were traces of alcohol in Vincent's blood, the levels were not significant enough to suggest intoxication played a major role in the incident. The conclusion pointed more to the harsh weather conditions and the freezing temperature of the water as the primary factors in his death. Vincent's kayak was recovered a few days later, and the absence of the drain plug, along with the missing locking ring on the paddle, was noted. However, experts confirmed that the missing parts did not significantly impact the kayak's performance. The defense team emphasized that none of these factors alone could explain Vincent's death. They argued that the combination of cold water, strong winds, lack of a life jacket, and the alcohol in his system created a perfect storm of dangerous conditions, ultimately leading to the tragedy. Angelica, they contended, was not responsible for the accident, and that it was simply a result of Vincent's own recklessness choosing to kayak in dangerous weather conditions while intoxicated. However, the prosecution was not so convinced. They focused heavily on the inconsistencies in Angelica's statements, interpreting them as evidence of her involvement in Vincent's death. Their theory was that Angelica had intentionally tampered with the kayak, creating a situation where Vincent would be unable to survive. While the defense fought to show that this was nothing more than a tragic accident, the prosecution's case grew stronger, leading to a shift in their approach. They began to doubt their ability to prove intentional harm through the tampering of the kayak's drain plug or the paddle. Such actions seemed overly complicated and insufficient to convince a jury of premeditated murder. Faced with these complications, the prosecution offered Angelica a plea deal which would allow her to plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter rather than face a charge of intentional harm. The deal would result in a much shorter sentence, avoiding the possibility of a life sentence. Angelica agreed to the plea deal and was sentenced to 4 years for involuntary manslaughter. Given the time she had already spent in custody while awaiting trial, she had only a few months left to serve. In December 2017, after serving 32 months in prison, Angelica was released on parole. Although her official sentence had been 4 years, the time served and early release allowed her to regain her freedom much sooner than anticipated. However, Vincent's family was not satisfied with the outcome. They continued to believe that Angelica was directly responsible for their son's death and voiced their discontent with what they saw as a lenient sentence. Angelica, on the other hand, maintained her innocence throughout the ordeal. She insisted that the tragedy was a result of a tragic accident, not her actions. Once released, Angelica faced a new set of challenges. Deportation loomed over her, and she struggled to find stable employment. She also attempted to claim the life insurance benefits from Vincent's policy, but because of her guilty plea, she was legally barred from receiving the money. 16 months after her release, Angelica was forced to return to her home country, where she began the difficult process of rebuilding her life. Leaving the painful memories of the trial and the media circus behind, she enrolled in a university, found a job, and worked to move forward with her life. Despite her outward efforts to recover, the shadow of the tragedy remained a part of her past. Vincent's death. Angelica's behavior during the investigation, the conflicting testimonies from various experts, and the ultimate resolution of the case all contribute to a complex and emotionally charged picture. It's a case that continues to provoke questions about justice, guilt, and the reliability of the evidence. In such situations, it's easy to be swayed by public opinion or the prosecution's narrative. Yet, it's important to remember that the truth is not always clear, and the justice system is not infallible. Interrogation tactics, psychological pressure, and the exhaustion of prolonged questioning can lead to false confessions. Angelica, as many argue, found herself in a situation where her missteps, both in her words and actions, were used against her to paint a picture of guilt. But the question remains, was Angelica truly responsible for Vincent's death, or was it simply a tragic accident that spiraled into a nightmare for everyone involved? The conflicting evidence, the manipulation of statements, and the complex nature of the case make it hard to reach a clear conclusion. This is a story that calls into question the very nature of justice and whether we can always trust the conclusions drawn from conflicting evidence. What do you think? Is Angelica a victim of a judicial error, or is she genuinely connected to Vincent's tragic death? How much weight should we give to the inconsistencies in her statements, and can we ever fully trust a system that may be influenced by emotion and bias? The answers to these questions are not easy, but they are worth considering as we reflect on this difficult and tragic case.